Hello and welcome to the Witch Source. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited to get to interview an idol of mine. I have with me today Ariel Gatoga of Ariel's Corner. And I am a huge fan and I have been for a while. He is just simply amazing and I love the work that he does. So, welcome, Ariel. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump right on in. Um, when did you fall in love with magic?
Oh my, what a question. I love that question. Well, I I don't really remember not being involved with magic. And this sounds like so silly, but when I was in kindergarten, the the kids were always like going to the teacher and saying, I don't know how to play with him. All he wants to do is go play with the fairies, and we don't really know what that means.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I absolutely love that.
And we all, yeah, that was like my thing when I was little is they all wanted to play house, they wanted to play, whatever, adult game, like play grown up, play office, all that. I wanted to play witch. We're gonna cast spells and we're gonna play witch. So I can't say that there's ever been a time I haven't been absolutely enthralled with magic, even back to my earliest memories.
That is awesome. I love that answer. I hope that my 3-year-old gets to say the same thing because I'm constantly exposing her, especially to fairies. I love
Oh,
them.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so can you remember what your earliest exposure to magic
To
was?
to
Like, what was
actual to
meaningful?
actual craft, you mean actual witchcraft?
Well,
Ye
well, both. Like, so you had the always had a love of it. Was there something that,
I
you know,
always
took that out?
it's funny you asked me that because I was just thinking about this the other day. There were always little things that I would do, and it would freak people out, and I couldn't do it again sometimes because then I'd be self-conscious, but I
Right.
I could just, like I remember the one that the thought that came to me earlier today is when I was, maybe in 4th grade, somebody's the carpool driver, her car wasn't working, and so I did this little gesture that I don't remember where I learned it, and I made the car start, and she said, "How did you do that?" And I got so scared, so I kinda withdrew. There were all kinds of little things like that. I remember that in 6th grade, I put up my hand because I was expecting a bird to come land on my hand. I just knew I could call forth a bird. Well, it wasn't a bird, it was this little moth. It was a little moth, and it stayed in my hand all through school that whole day. It wouldn't leave. And at first it was really sweet and cute, and then the teacher started getting kind of freaked. Like, what is this? And finally the moth went away. Little things like that. I was always doing some little thing, but then I would get self-conscious and I couldn't repeat it. I thought, oh, is that how you do that? And then I try it again and it wouldn't work. So it wasn't until probably, mm, I guess I was maybe 12, 13, something like that. I started reading some books. And back then, because I'm almost 60, so back then, oh, I mean, there was Diary of a Witch by Sybil Leek. There was Mastering Witchcraft out yet? I think it was, but I don't think I got into that one until I was about 16. There were books like that. I would go to the library and look under all the occult literature and try to read as much as I could, but there really wasn't that much. Gardner had his books out, and that didn't actually make a lot of sense to me. I remember when I was little, I thought that was kind of all a little bit silly, but
Right.
but I liked Sybil. I liked her because I really felt some authenticity from her, at least in my young little mind. And then when I think I was probably about 15, I started reading tarot cards. And then 16, I actually signed up for a class and I took classes with a teacher. And I was
Oh,
with her
cool.
for several years. Yeah.
Wow. So was it hard to find a class back then?
It was, except for this, I just stumbled upon this lady that was teaching. I mean, how did I? It was, oh, it was at the Eye of the Cat in Long Beach. I stumbled across the Eye of the Cat in Long Beach. It was an occult store, and the owner back then was teaching, and I just started
Okay.
studying with her, and I was with her for several years, and I learned a lot, and then, kind of grew out of it and went on to other teachers, and I've studied with a lot of teachers, and a lot of people say, "Wow, all your stuff that you do." I say, "Well, none of it's really all that unique. It's all stuff I learned from other people that it's filtered through my way of understanding it, my way of doing it. But I
Right.
definitely credit everything to everybody I studied with. It's not like I came up with most of that myself.
I mean, I think that's so rare nowadays to be able to just find a teacher like that, especially one that would be able to take on students in that way, I think. So
Hmm.
that's
I
really
don't know.
cool.
Yeah, it's probably true. I don't know because I'm sort of out of touch um with that because everything's sort of moved out of the local and into the online.
Right.
It seems like everything is online now, but it seems like you can just like Google witch course and like a billion different little things come up and they'll be happy to take your money and teach you how to be a witch.
Well, and exactly, and it's hard like to sift through and to know what's legit, what's real, what's totally fantasy.
Yeah, right. Well, we always say, or I always say, and we, the people in my kind of orbit is that it's real if it works. If
Yeah.
you actually can get results and you're not just fooling yourself, if you can say, yeah, these are verifiable, repeatable results. I actually cast the spell and this is my result, then it worked. And then if you can do it again and you get another success, you found something authentic. If not, what the problem that I see that happens with a lot of people is that they think that there's something wrong if it doesn't work. And so then they sort of rationalize themselves into say, oh, that worked, but in a different way. And my perspective is you learn just as much when it didn't work. So if it didn't
Mm,
work, yay, it didn't work. So that you can either fix that or stop doing that or find a way to fill in the gaps or something so that you can find a spell that does get you the results that you want. There's all kinds of ways to troubleshoot that. But like you said, if you don't have anybody that's kind of been around the block for a while that has seen a bunch of that stuff, they don't necessarily know how to help you.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, awesome. So you just always had a love for magic and then got into the books and found a teacher. Um, was there, I'm still curious though, because I feel like there's like a missing gap. So, like way, way, way back, like when you were a child, was there some kind of exposure to fairy
Oh, to,
tales or fairies or something that really like started that love?
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I didn't have like a grandma that was a witch or any of that you hear about. I definitely didn't have that. In fact, my grandma was sort of rolled her eyes about stuff like that. So
Right.
did my dad. My mom, I think if there was any actual witch blood, it would be on my mom's side of the family because she we have in our genealogy, she's really into genealogy and which helped me when I was working with ancestors.
Yes.
She found that our ancestor was the last person to be executed in England for heresy.
Oh,
But he
wow.
wasn't a witch, he was an anti-Baptist. So he didn't believe that people should be baptized at birth. He thought that was a type of child abuse. And they didn't like that, so they killed him.
Right, right. Makes sense.
Yeah, but as far as craft stuff, as far as witchy stuff, it was all pretty much just from within me. I never there was very little time in my life that I wasn't always sort of searching for that I just kind of had this compelling desire for what I now know to be the craft. I didn't know what it really was. I knew it was witchcraft. I knew that that's probably what it was called, or magic or something like that. But I didn't understand what I was looking for, but I knew it when I saw it.
Nice. I got it. So you really had to trust yourself and your gut and your intuition and just let it be the guide.
It was one of those, like, it was almost obsessive when I was little. I knew there had to be something. I knew there had to be. And I remember I had a lot of kind of intuitive understandings of things that later I thought, wow, I kind of got that when I was so little. I understood that. Because a lot of times you
Yeah.
look back on the things that you thought about when you were a kid, and you think, oh, poor little thing. You really thought this. But like, I remember thinking to myself, because, well, here I said that on my dad's side of the family, we didn't have magic. Actually, my dad was my first magic teacher in a way, because he taught me how to sit and relax myself and visualize what I wanted. He actually taught me
Oh.
lessons about that. And I remember putting that together with more of because I was raised a Catholic.
Hmm.
So I remember thinking, and my dad was not. My dad was sort of like not part of the Catholic Church. He separated himself. He was sort of atheistic. So, but it's a long story. My stepmother was Catholic, so she insisted that I get baptized. So I got baptized and I became Catholic, for at least for my younger childhood. But I remember thinking to myself, well, if there is a God, then it must mean that if I'm able to do the stuff that Dad's teaching me, that that's how God works, that he must do the same thing. He must create in the same way. And I remember looking back on that when I was, much older, thinking, whoa, I kind of hit that one right on the head.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
sort of mental teacher was teaching me at that moment.
yeah. Wow. I just think that's wonderful that you just always had this sense and this knowing and this something inside of you that just had to seek it out and find it.
Yeah, it drove everybody else crazy though, because I just seemed like one of those children that's like, what? Where did we go wrong?
I do understand that. I do understand that. That's funny, but true. I get it. All right. So you got with this teacher when you were a teenager. So where did it go from there? So you started going with learning the craft with the teachers.
Yes.
And at what point were you like, I want to transition into being the teacher?
Well, actually, that was their requirement. That was part of our training after a
Okay.
while, is that you had to be a teacher. And now I look back and I'm like, well, how nice for you that we were able to sell all your stuff at your shop by teaching this stuff. But at the time, I thought, wow, this is great part of my training. It was probably a little bit of both, actually.
Right, right.
But so I went through their whole initiatory system. And they claimed to be teaching something called the Druidic Craft of the Wise, also known as the DCW. That's what they claimed. And we fell out after about, I would say, a good 6 years. That group and I just said, it just was one of those things. It was time. It was just time. It was
Right.
no fault, no blame, none of
It
that.
just ran its course.
It was just done. But I had been teaching. I lived about a county away from there, so it was a bit of a commute anyway to go over there. And so I had already started teaching in my own community. So I had already had some people that I was teaching, and I was in this little. It was sort of like a bookstore. I came across it. It wasn't really an occult shop, but it had some occult books, sort of maybe a head shop, but not quite a head shop. It had a couple of, it was a weird little, cool little shop. And I was
Right.
looking through their stuff, and one of the books from the Druidic Craft of the Wise was on his bookshelf. And I said, to my knowledge, all that stuff had been unpublished. I said, where did you get this? And he said, I published it. And I said, how? How did you even know about this? And he said, well, I studied with him. The guy that wrote this book went by the name of Eli. And Eli was the head of this whole Druidic Craft of the Wise, which I thought the whole thing was BS, because I thought they were, just, I just didn't believe them anymore. I'd kind of caught them in some dishonest things. And I'm like, okay, I thought the whole thing was, I don't know. I didn't know. So I told him what I had gone through, and he goes, "Oh, that sounds weird." And so he introduced me to Eli had passed away already. He passed away like the year that I started studying with those people, actually. But his widow was still alive at the time. So, and she was way over, she was back in Arkansas and I'm in California.
Oh,
So
wow.
I started some correspondence with her. I started talking to her, and I started studying with her. And then I flew back there a couple times, got my ordination and so we started a whole Druidic Craft of the Wise community locally. And then the way that particular tradition works is, it's like my job to sort of put myself out of business. You don't just stay the witch king or the witch queen. You teach everybody how to do it, and then they go do it, and then they teach people, and then they go do it. And so it's sort of, so I kind of retired and graduated out of that. And when I was sort of, I had been teaching publicly for so long in the local area.
Right.
But I'd stopped doing that too, and I'd sort of just, I'd done my time. I've been very active for like 20 years by the time that my student, and he had a podcast, and he said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I said, "Because what would I talk about? I don't, who would care?" And he said, "Well, you could do your witch's primer. You could do that whole class right on a podcast." And I thought, that's a good idea. And he goes, "And then you've got all these tapes that you've been making of lectures for the last 15, 20 years or whatever. Why don't you put those up as a podcast?" And I thought, well, I don't think anybody'd be that interested, but it would be a nice resource for our local community, make it easier because they can just go on iTunes for it. So yeah, let's do that. So I did. I took the next, several months, and I recorded the entire witch's primer, which is 18 weeks, and then while I was doing that, I would digitize these silly little cassette tapes that, you can, if you listen to those old lectures, even my voice is so high, not necessarily because I was so much younger, but because the tape had sped up, And
Right.
so
Right.
I put all those up, and I thought it was interesting, and I didn't know anything about any of that back then. I didn't know how to like check to see what my audience was or any of that. So I just put it up and I went about my business. And unbeknownst to me, the witch's primer got really popular. And I didn't know. And somebody said, "You're number one." And I said, "Number one?" And they're so like, "Yeah, you're the number one podcast." I said, "Oh, you mean like pagan podcasts?" And they're like, "No, you're like beating out the Christian podcasts. You're like number one in all of spirituality." And all of a sudden I panicked. I'm like, I don't want to be number one. I don't want to be number one. I don't want to be that exposed. That doesn't sound like fun. So I kind of, that was really hard for me, But then I kept putting out some more lectures, and I sort of kept it going. But I was getting a bunch of just backlash from Christians, and it was hard. It was hard back then. And my computer got hacked, my website got hacked. I mean, there's a lot of that. And I just I went into a kind of a meditative state, and I said, should I like just pull back? And the universe basically said, yes, you should pull back. So I did. I just took everything down. I gave everybody, fair warning. I'm like, I'm going to just pull back for a while. I'll be back later. And I just took everything down. And I would say about a year after that, I went into a full-fledged midlife crisis where I was just the last person that should be online talking about spiritual stuff. You know what I mean? And I thought, how perfect was this that I got all that stuff down? I mean, after I went through it all, after I went through it all, I kind of came back out the other side, and I started getting this sense. I guess we have to put stuff back up again, right? I always try to follow direction from my own spiritual intuition.
Yeah.
So I did, and I thought, isn't that wonderful how I wasn't out there while I was going through what I was going through? Because who knows what I would have done? Who knows how
Right.
bad it would have been? And so somebody was looking out for me. And so then I was back in my right mind and I was able to start again. So hopefully I stay sane for the rest of the time that I'm online again.
I understand. Like I remember just trying to, you know, soak up as much as I could and listen to as much as I could. So I know I definitely was probably contributing to that number one spot because I didn't even listen to podcasts. And somehow I stumbled across yours, and it was like the only thing I listened to. And then I found one other one that I started listening to, and those two were it for me. Um, but I can tell you, I was so devastated when everything finally came down and I couldn't find
Oh,
the podcast anymore. And
oh
I, to
shoot.
this day, still have it saved on my phone, like waiting to see, like, oh, is it going to come back up? Is it going to come back up? Um, so yeah, it's still subscribed on there, and I still have like the pictures and everything that you had
I'm not
of your
sure about podcasting. I mean, I may put stuff up as a podcast again, but when I came back, I don't know why I went on YouTube. I think it was just because it was one of those platforms I'd never really used and I had the account. And so I thought, well, let's try it, because
right,
where I had left off, we were just starting to get into the Psalm magic, which is a part of the more traditional witchcraft traditions that a lot of people don't know about,
right,
and so
yeah.
that's what I started with because the Psalms are what got me through the hard time that I was going through when I was offline. So I thought, well, let's just pick up where we left off and we'll start with some Psalms, and then maybe we'll put the witches primer back up, and then I got all the classes back up, and everything went back up eventually.
Yeah, it was a huge help for me. And I know that like I had downloaded as much as I could when you did give that warning of I'm pulling stuff down, so get your stuff. So when I went through some hard times and I'm like, I just need some magical inspiration,
Sure.
um, I would go dig it out and listen to it again. And I would always just go back and check the podcast to see if it was ever gonna
Oh,
be
that's so
back
sweet.
up.
And I feel so bad because you don't know how many people have said that to me. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to, I felt
No,
so
I
bad.
mean,
I really felt so bad because people really felt like kind of abandoned, and that wasn't the point. That was not the point at all. The point was I needed to feel safe. And then actually there was something coming that I didn't realize. So I really kind of needed my space for that. I went through that whole what I call a midlife crisis. I kind of just got suckered into some stuff, with it was before I knew about narcissism and all that kind of stuff. I got pulled into an orbit with somebody that had I been, I think, out there, this person might have found a way to use that. So I think in a way it was a way to protect me. So I don't know. I maybe that's me rationalizing. I don't know, but it just seems like it was really perfect that it happened.
oh, I definitely think, I mean, especially since you got the call to and the message to pull that down right before, and get everything done and kind of backed off and under the radar again right before all that happened. I'm sure everything happened exactly the way it's supposed to because, what you're talking about, whatever you got sucked into, it's like maybe not only would it have been bad for you, but it might have been damaging to the people that follow you as
That's
well.
what I was more worried about. When I got back, I thought, I could have actually been not what I want, and that's to be a source of help. I could have been a source of harm, and I
Right.
think that this was a wonderful way for me to just protect everybody from that. So I don't really regret taking it down, but I do regret that people got their feelings hurt.
Well, I wouldn't say I got my feelings hurt, but I would say I totally missed you. And I
Oh,
was thrilled when I got the email. I guess you kept your email list because I got an
Yes.
email that you were coming back, and I was like, oh, no way. And I was so
I knew I
excited.
was coming back. I knew that that was not going to be a forever thing.
Right.
So yeah, so I did keep the email list. I knew that that was gonna be okay.
Well, I am so glad that you did. And I think the work that you have done and put out there for people has been just incredible. And, going back to like we were talking about that there's so much online. I
Yeah.
feel like your work has always been a source of um, inspiration and also being positive and
Mhm.
solution oriented, which is a
Yes.
lot of what you don't find anymore, I feel like. Um, and I know that I don't think I would be doing a lot of what I do now um, had I not had that influence of your work in my life.
Oh,
So
that's really nice to hear. Thank you.
yeah, and I started with the Witch's Primer as well, and I still recommend it today because it's just like you say, it's timeless. So
Thank you so much.
where did your slogan come from?
Which one?
The timeless magic for today.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think I just came up with it one day. I didn't even, I think I was just, it said, you need a tagline. And I thought, okay. And I just wrote something and I like thought, that works.
Well, I think it's great because it definitely is timeless, and you touch on so many different um, aspects. So, a lot of the different areas that you talk about and teach on your YouTube channel, were they all a part of the DCW, or are they things that you picked up from the different teachers along the way?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think all of the teachers along the way. Not everything comes from the DCW, although Eli did teach a lot about wisdom in general. It wasn't just magical techniques and things like that. It was general wisdom. So, I do credit a lot from what I got from my craft studies within that tradition. But no, I like the angel magic and the psalm magic. None of that came from DCW. I got those from other teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, and uh, a lot of just the real practical magic I learned from my first teacher, like the candles and things like that. I learned from my first teacher. All the basic witchcraft from a witch's primer I learned from my first teacher. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Was
So
she?
that's stuff that that I learned. So it's like how I trained. So I'm just giving you what I learned.
Was that a part of any kind of tradition?
Well, not the witch's primer. I kind of fleshed that out and sort of made it my own because I mean, if you looked at their intro class and mine, you might think, really, this came from that. So you'd have to see my my whole journey and process to understand. Oh yeah, that did come from that, um, but witch's primer ended up kind of just reflecting my perspective, my point of view, which I mean, what else are you going to teach, right? Except for what you know. And
Exactly.
I think the um the tradition, they were kind of making their own tradition, but a lot of what they called what they did was DCW, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. They kind of, and I understand in retrospect now. At the time, I thought, "Oh, you liars!" And you just you just lied to me. How could you're misrepresenting yourself? And it really wasn't that. It really wasn't. I wasn't fair when I thought that. They just were using it in a way that made sense to them. And a lot of people get really upset when you sort of change a tradition, but there's no way around it. I mean, we live in a different time. We live in a different world. We live in a different culture than we lived in when a lot of these
Right.
things were started. So you have to let it change. You have to let it grow and let it be the way it is. And I'm a lot more uh tolerant of that than I used to be. I used to be not so nice. Well, I've always been nice, but I used to be a lot more rigid about certain things in the craft than I am now.
What are some of your favorite aspects of the craft?
Hmm. Well, I really like, I used to, my thing that I used to love more than anything was ritual. I just would love ritual, and I would love the sabbats. And back in our local community, there's probably not a lot of people around that remember this, but back in the day, back in the probably the 90s, we we would do these huge sabbats, and we would invite people from everywhere, and it would be like, a couple hundred people. We'd rent out a big giant campground up in the Angeles Crest National Forest that was completely private,
Oh,
and
wow.
we would I wrote a bunch of music, and we would have rehearsals, to make sure that the music sounded good, and we'd have dancing and a fire ceremony. And so that used to be what I loved more than anything, was that kind of thing. And after I got a little older, it just became very, very tiresome to keep that up. And so I moved off of a lot of that, and got more solitary in my practice, and got more involved in the more, I don't know, internal processes of the mind rather than so much ritual. I still like ritual a lot, but I think as I've gotten older, I've really gotten more interested in um, simplifying and streamlining things in a way that still keeps them effective. You don't want to water it down so much that it's not effective, but to take a lot of that excess ritual out of there that might be overly cumbersome. And so that's sort of what's been most interesting to me, is how to streamline things to keep it potent without overdoing it.
Right, right. What is your favorite thing to teach as far as the craft goes?
Mm, um, well, see, I'm in a place right now where I'm very lucky that I can just do a class, present the class, and then we have a forum, we have a Facebook group. Talk amongst yourselves. If I'll answer questions if I can. It's not the same kind of teaching as when I was a teacher, where I'd have to be there and help, a lot of one-on-one, and help tutor people. I don't do that anymore. So I feel very fortunate that I can just sort of teach what I like at the moment. I like right now we're going through the Arbitel of Magic, which there would have been no interest in that locally, really. Maybe we'd have a couple people, but when it's online, there's enough people that might be interested in that makes it worth my while. So I can put that out there. I did that fairy magic course. That was a lot of fun to do that. And I still love doing the psalm magic, because there's so much wisdom in the Psalms. And it cracks me up when people say, "Oh, I don't like Psalms because they're so Christian." And I always laugh, and I think, well, you do know that they are thousands of years predating Christianity, right? Very, very much older than Christianity. So just FYI, if you're going to hate them for something else, because they're not Christian in origin.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was uh, talking to somebody, you know, a long time ago, but it has been since you started the Psalm Magic, and that's exactly what she said, was that she didn't like the Psalm Magic because it was just too Christian, and I was like, did you miss the intro about the Psalms? Because I think you should go back and listen to that.
And and I am not a proselytizer. I mean, if you don't like Psalms, you can even still study with me and never ever look at a Psalm, because I do so much other stuff and we only mention the Psalms in the Psalm class. So it's not like that's all you're going to get.
Right.
But it's interesting because the Psalm in YouTube, the playlists now, my playlists are called podcasts, because they're actually going to be moving into podcasting more and more, I guess, on YouTube. Well, the podcast for the Psalm Magic has more listeners than the podcast for a Witch's Primer. And who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Wow.
Yeah. So there's so many people that come just for the Psalms that aren't really interested in the witchcraft. you know, and then there's witches that are kind of interested in the Psalms because it was something that they'd never done. And I thought, isn't that a nice little unifier that I never knew existed, where there's something that several different kind of people can come together on. So I kind of like that. Uh, the angel magic is something that I love, and it was another thing that some witches shied away from because it's too much high magic. You know, it's too ceremonial, but it's not really. Not if you look at not if you really look at it. And you know who was really into angel magic, speaking of her, is Sybil Leek. That was her big thing. And she didn't really publicize it too much, but that was one of her main practices was this angel magic, like what we teach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and same with I now I'm not that familiar with Alex Sanders, but from what I understand is he studied angel magic and he liked it quite a bit as well. So
So if you were to say you were, well, I guess so technically you weren't under any type of a tradition per se, other than through the DCW,
well,
or or
my
did you
tradition,
study under some kind of? Go ahead.
I was with that teacher for a while who I thought was DCW and was sort of
Okay.
like her own version of DCW. But then when I found the DCW for real, I totally ordained into that, and I sort of, that was a tradition that was kind of dying out. It was sort of dying out, and we had 4 DCW groups locally, and they were thriving, and so we sort of kept that alive. And what happened was with my lectures, and because when I first started doing those taped lectures, they were all to DCW people. And so they were sort of DCW lectures, even though I didn't break any oaths or anything like that. But we kind of talked about the basic wisdom that we knew. And so when I did the first podcast, they were called Ariel Gatoga's DCW, or Druidic Craft of the Wise lectures. And so when I came back, somebody said, "How come you don't talk about the DCW so much anymore? Did you leave?" And it's not that I left, it's just that I rethought things, because what happened was when I put it out there as the DCW lectures, a couple of different things. One thing is people thought I was the head of the DCW, and I'm not. The DCW is much, much bigger than I am. I'm just one little, it was dying out but now it's not. Now it's big again. So it's like
Right.
I'm just one little flake in the snowstorm of DCW. So I didn't think that it was appropriate for me to even give the impression of that, because I didn't want that, because it's not accurate. And the other
Right.
thing is the DCW is impossible to study unless you're local. It's impossible. You need to be, it's an initiatory path. You need to be in person. They don't do any other kind of, initiations. And so I was always getting people that wanted to study DCW. And well, unless you move out here, there's no way to do that. And I'm not going to be your teacher because I don't teach anymore. So, but I can introduce you to somebody. So
Right.
it just became sort of I thought, a problem. So when I came back, I'm like, let's take the DCW out of there and we'll just leave that out of the equation. They don't need to know about that, because why give somebody something that they can't have? Offer something that they can't have.
It does make sense. It does make sense, because I do remember the DCW days, and I had noticed that was being left out. But it does make total sense now, especially um,
But that's
when
still
you.
it's still my tradition, to answer your question. That's still my tradition. Yeah.
Yes, yes, but it does make sense that it's an initiatory, and it is the person to person.
Yes.
Um,
And I'm not the DCW. That was the other thing. I'm like, hey, I've got this weird image of myself out there that's incorrect. And so when I came back, I'm like, let's just fix that. Let's just fix that. Take the opportunity.
awesome. So, where do you see yourself going now with the craft?
Um, well, it's so much work. It really is. It was somebody talked to me on the Discord server the other day about how they've been through so many groups, and they always felt like, there was a problem with it, and they were so glad to find me because they didn't feel like they were in a cult or something like that. And I said something sort of sarcastically, but it was sort of not. I said, "Well, some people are in it for power, and some people are in it for money, and for me, it's always been sort of a nuisance." So, so I think that keeps me honest. And I was only sort of kidding, but in a way, it's true. The craft has always been a sort of nuisance to me because I was I was so compelled to teach, and I'm so private. And how do you square that circle? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's always been sort of this push pull of like, I've got to do what I'm here to do. I feel called to do, to teach. But it'd be so nice not to. It'd be so nice to just hang out and be a witch.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, I don't really think that so much, but it was kind of a funny little sarcastic comment. But there was a grain of truth to that, I think. A tiny grain of truth, but I love it. I love what we're doing. I love all the people. I am so blessed because, you know, you see on a lot of like YouTube channels and any social media, there's a lot of real trolly kind of mean-spirited stuff out there, and
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate because I have such bare minimum of that nonsense. Everybody is so kind and so sweet, and how can you not love doing what you're doing when people are so kind, right? So, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I think that, my goal is to just eventually put out everything I know, and once I've done that, I can stop. And I haven't started. I've got reams of information I haven't even started putting out there.
Okay.
So I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think I'm going to get through it all. But I've amassed a lot of knowledge over my life, and I try to put it to good use. But I think sometimes the best use you can put it to is to put it out there for people that might find it useful. Because if I put something in, like, even a witch's primer or the angel course or the intermediate witchcraft course or the advanced witchcraft course that I've got, somebody may not get it, but they will get it from this other thing that I know how to do. So if I keep putting stuff out there, maybe it'll help somebody. That's my goal, is to be helpful.
I definitely think it's been extremely helpful, especially for people, like during the whole COVID time of not being able to interact, not being able to go out and find,
Mm,
and, having to be in this kind of lockdown situation,
yes,
and people are searching for answers. They're looking for something more.
sure.
Um, and I think it's great that you're one of the people that people can go to, that are seeking and be able to find what they're looking for, especially with the wide variety of things that you've taught so far.
Well, I find that I'm an Aries, so I have an impatience about me sometimes, which I've gotten a lot better because I do work on myself. I do try to walk the walk. I'm not just, like, do this, but I'm not going to. I try to
Right.
walk the walk, but I still notice that I get really impatient with a lot of um, the garbage that I see out there. And I think that's kind of what motivates me more than anything. It's just like, I don't want to be judgmental because, I mean, if it gives you comfort and if you love it, and that, then do it. But uh, it's not, it's, if I think a lot of people have never gotten a grounding in just basic magical theory. And if they did, they could make their own choices better instead of saying, well, I read this and I heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
exhausting because I don't wanna, discount your experience. Okay, that's great. If that works for you, I love that for you, then keep doing that. But I think it's not that. I think a lot of times people just keep spinning their wheels because they read this, and they read that, and they read this, and then they read that, and they keep trying stuff and hoping that something works, and they don't have a basic magical infrastructure or understanding of some real basic principles that if they did, they wouldn't have to go out there and try this and try that. They could they can do their own thing, you know? And so that's kind of where I think what motivates me is to not necessarily combat all of the misinformation, because there's no way to do that, but
Right.
at least dilute it with something that I perceive to be more accurate. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it is, but I perceive it to be more accurate.
I mean, I think it's very comprehensible, and like you're talking about, it does give that foundation to help people build up their magical confidence, um,
Mhm.
and to be able to trust themselves and listen to themselves, and to, like you're saying, have that foundation to be able to say, that doesn't sound right, or okay, yeah, that makes sense. That fits into
Sure.
this, foundation for me, and I can build on that. And I think especially with, the witch talk blowing up, and
Mhm.
um, so many people just putting out so much
Nonsense.
stuff.
Absolute nonsense. Just
Yeah.
absolute garbage. Some of it's okay. Some of it's okay, but some of it I'm thinking, oh, now here's the next spate of superstitions that I'm going to help undo when people come and start asking me questions, because magic is not superstition. And that's like the first thing that I think that people are so surprised at, that you have to let go of your superstitious beliefs in order to have any power in magic. You almost have to start from scratch, unlearn everything, and then start over again if you have a bunch of superstition involved in what you do. It's like, yeah, it's nice that you have that crystal. And yes, it can have some energy. And I love that. But it's not going to do anything. You're
Right.
going to do the thing. It's
Right.
you. You're the one. It's not your wand. It's not all of those things. Those are great tools. And we have them, but they're not powerful. You are.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the things of where the witch source came from, is that longing to be a source of magical empowerment,
I love
and
that.
to help people remember that they are the magic.
See,
you know
so then you're providing a really good service when you do that, because I mean, that in and of itself is doing like what I was talking about. It's diluting some of the garbage. And I don't mean to disparage people, but they just make it up, which is fine. I mean, it's fine to be creative. Do your thing. You go for
Right.
it. You do you.
Right.
I'm happy that you're happy. But if you do that and at the same time put yourself out there as being some kind of expert that knows what they're talking about, when you obviously don't, then you've got that other layer of insincerity and dishonesty and all of that other stuff it's not healthy.
Right. And then you have to question the motive. Like,
Yes.
why are you, what's the motive? What are you gaining
Yes.
out of this?
Right. Right. It used to drive Sybil Leek crazy. Oh, I bring her up. I don't know why. She's not like that big of a deal for me, but it used to drive her crazy. All of the stuff that was going on in the '60s when the witchcraft was just kind of coming into the public zeitgeist, and she'd be like, "Oh, that's not how it is. Oh, we don't do that."
Yeah.
She and Anton LaVey were always going head to head. She's like, he's a charlatan, doesn't know what he's talking about. And
I mean, there's so much stuff out there. And now that I've got the shop open, I've got people coming in, and they ask sometimes shocking questions, and I'm like, where did you hear that?
you
That's a new one
know.
on me. I haven't heard that
Oh,
one yet,
well, I'll
but
tell you the amount of time I've used moon water. 0. Not that you can't. I love it. It's fabulous. You do it. But it's never, ever once been part of anything that I've learned in my whole life until I was on YouTube and had 72 people ask me about moon water in about 3 weeks. And I'm like, okay, this is a thing now, I guess, right? And
oh
the
wow.
sage sticks smudging, that came from the 80s, right? The New Agers
Yeah.
co-opted certain Native American practices of burning sacred sage to bless and purify a space, and then they pasted over an old-timey name from the 18th century called smudging, which is what they used to do in order to rid a home of pests. They would literally burn things in the home so that there was so much smoke that everything would go away. And that was smudging. It wasn't spiritual necessarily. But so now everybody thinks I'm doing this ancient Native American ritual called smudging. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're doing a new age thing that is based somewhat on a Native American practice, which you don't understand because you're not part of that tribe. So there are other ways to do this, and there's nothing wrong with saging. You go ahead. Sage does work beautifully, but it's not the one and only way to purify a space.
Right. And I think that's part of it too. And what I love about the variety of um, magical information that you're putting out there, because you help people understand that there is no end all be all. And
No,
it's like everybody's searching for the right way, or, what's the only way? What's and it's what works for you,
you have to train your mind. You have to train your energy centers. You have to actually train, just like a musician has to train. You can have natural talent in music, but if you don't train, if you don't have any technique, it's limited to what you can do. Just like me fixing that car. It's just like I couldn't do it again because I didn't know what I did. I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. But any art, and magic is an art, any
Yeah.
art requires practice. It requires training. It requires discipline, and it requires editing.
Yes.
Everything that is worthwhile, any kind of art, is highly edited. And that's why when I teach a course in one thing, I always say, for this course, just do this course. Once you're done with this course, do something else. But just commit yourself to just slimming down and just doing this one practice for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 18 weeks or whatever it is. Just do this.
Right.
And the only reason I say that is not because I want you to give up your favorite thing and you can go back to your favorite thing later. It's just so that you can have some success.
And the experience of doing it that way.
Yes, you can actually build up some musculature. I mean, like in I was a composer, in another life, and my composition teacher in college used to give me very restrictive assignments. Would say, you can only use these 5 notes. You can
Oh,
only
yeah.
use this rhythm. You can only do this. You can only do that. And at first I thought, no, I want to do everything. And he's like, no, that's not the assignment. You can't do everything. And you even see that like on Project Runway, where they say, okay, now you need to do the designers, you're going to design for this, and it's got to be within these parameters. And when you do that for yourself, you really build some strength, you really build some ability, some skill, some technique, and you can really break through in your power. And so I think that there's a lot of people that are looking for, what tool should I use? What candle should I use? What oil should I use? What this, what that? Those things are fine. But
Right.
unless you have some sort of focused mental process and strength, it's really not going to help so much. It's just going to maybe be a placebo at best.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I totally agree with you. And and I think that's a good thing to put out there and let people know of, like, if you are following some of these uh, kind of crazy things that people are putting out there right now about the craft, and if that's something that you choose to believe about it, try it.
Yeah.
If
If
that's the
it
belief that you want to work within, try it. See how it works for you. And if it
and
doesn't,
Yeah, and if you get real results, if you can say, no, I did this because I wanted that and I got that, then hey, you found something that really works for you. But even if that's true, there's a better way of finding those things that work for you than throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks. There's a much more efficient way of going, and it doesn't have to be with my way. There's all kinds of great ways out there. You can just, even Scott Cunningham's um, that beginning book that he did for the solitary practitioner. It's a wonderful study. He was very, and the thing is about Scott is people don't realize that he really wasn't Wiccan. He was an actual witch. He was actually like from a tradition, and he had training, and he was really a real deal. He wasn't just some sort of new age author that sort of stumbled his way upon, publishing like so many people did after him. So many people that wrote these books and that set themselves up as experts had no background, no training, no nothing. They just made it stuff up. That's not Scott. He was a real witch. He really knew what he was talking about. But when you get with a publisher like that, they require you to write for their audience, which is why I told him, I said, I'm never going to do what you do because I don't want to be in that position that you're in. I don't want to do that. So I don't want to be famous, one, and B, I don't want to be told what I can write and what I can't write, because that's not the craft for me. The craft is the craft. The craft isn't what sells. The craft is what the craft is.
Right. True. So true. Well,
and a lot of people are missing. A lot of people, I don't even know who he is anymore. I think he's kind of like gotten put on the back burner with a lot of people. But he's a good resource. Even though I know a lot of his stuff is pretty fluffy because of Llewellyn, he really is a good resource.
I like to use a lot of his material too for a good resource, especially the the correspondences and the herbal information, things like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
All of that is valuable.
Where he was also very, very well trained in magical perfumery. And he didn't really write too much about that. I think he did an essential oils book, but that's where when we would ever, it wasn't like we were best friends or anything like that, but we did know each other. We were friendly. We did get together. And whenever we talked, we would mostly what we would end up talking about is perfumes and essential oils and things like that, and swapping formulas and stuff.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Yeah, and I think so many people now, they're either unfamiliar with him or for whatever reason he gets a pretty bad rap.
It's unfortunate, but you know what? That's what happens when you go out and put yourself out there as a Llewellyn author. Don Craig was good though, because he was able to, I think it was because it was ceremonial Golden Dawn magic. He was able to sort of rein in the editors from him and say, no, this is the way it is. It's got to be this way because of what it is. So
Right.
he was pretty lucky. But he's another one. If you want to study, ceremonial magic, if you could do a lot worse than studying Donald Michael Craig. You could do a lot worse than studying with him. He was wonderful. He was wonderful. And he and Scott Cunningham were pretty close geographically too.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, we all Southern California was sort of like a hotbed for a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 last questions. This was my favorite question to ask. Was there, or is there, that you're willing to share, a moment in your life where you just knew without a doubt that magic worked, magic was real, and nobody would ever be able to convince you otherwise?
Yeah. Well, there's been several, and they were all like that time with the car. It was so crazy how that worked, that everybody in the car was like, like they looked at me like there was something wrong with me. There was some crazy thing with me. So I remember was thinking that. And let's see, as an adult, I think probably the first time a spell worked, and especially when it worked, I don't remember what it was. What was it? Because it was sort of weird how it happened. I remember there was, well, this isn't the thing, but here's another example. What I was in a business with some people, but they were craft people. It was an occult store actually, so we were all in business together, and we needed money really bad for a bill that was coming up, and I said, well, let's do the money spell, but let's do a tithe. Let's like take 10% of what we need and tithe it somewhere because I know that really gets things working. And they all agreed. And so we did it. We sent out our tithe. We did our little group spell, and it was really a matter of days, if I remember correctly. We got an insurance settlement for water damage for our place that we didn't incur. There was no water damage. And we kept telling them, we don't get, this isn't for us because we didn't have water damage. And they said, no,
Oh,
all tenants get this because the water damage happened in the place. So everybody gets a part of it. It's like a class action, something or other. And it was like almost to the penny, 10 times what we tithed. Right.
wow.
So it was an exact number. So I remember I didn't need to be convinced that magic worked, but I remember going, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Did you have a time when you knew?
Oh, you're the only ones that ever asked me that. Uh, Gosh, I'm like you. I've got like so many and several. They just kind of happen all the time.
Yeah.
I would say the um, the biggest one. Gosh, there's so many. Like there was a time where I was shown. Well, that would be more of like a spiritual gift, but I was shown like a vision of what was going to happen, and then like it all happened exactly.
Yes.
And that was pretty cool. But I would say one of the most recent, I did a spell and I asked for exactly $5,000. Um, and I don't know why I asked for $5,000. It was, I can't remember what exactly I needed it for, or wanted it for, but I just had this like, I don't know, like it was just weighing on me, like I need this, and I need to do this spell work for this $5,000. So I did it, and it happened in like the coolest, most unexpected way. So I had gone out on disability, and anyway, and I had gone like part time for a while before that or whatever, and then like months later, right after I had done this spell work, I get a phone call from this insurance company, and they're like, "We're settling up with you. We went back, from the time that you were working part time until you had your settled, and so we're going to be direct depositing into your account 5,000." Such and such, such amount. And it was like $5,010.35 or something. And I just remember being like speechless. Like
the craft seems to love to work through insurance companies.
apparently, yes, yes. Maybe there's a reason for that. But
I
yeah.
love it.
And like I didn't even know that was a thing. I had no idea that they were going to do that. I had no idea that it was even a possibility.
I love
know?
that.
And I didn't know if to laugh or cry. I was just
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. I love
yeah.
that. I
I was
love it
like,
when that happens.
this is so insane. And I was just like, thank you, thank you. This is, yeah, it was so cool how it happened. But
My first teacher, because I wanted to be in a relationship, and she said, why don't you do a perfect mate spell? So I said, how do I do that? So she gave me this whole thing. It's this big long thing. And part of it was I had to come up with something I would say to the person, and that if they repeated something back to me in a specific way, and it couldn't be super obvious, it had to be a little bit specific so that it wasn't like, how are you? I'm fine. It couldn't be like that. It had to be
right,
something more unusual. Then I would know that they were my perfect mate. And she goes, and that you may not get them right away. It may be years before they show up, but it will work. Well, with my person that I've been with probably for the last, I think we've been together for 21 years now. When we were first together, accidentally said the thing. I had forgotten about the spell. I figured, well, that one didn't work. And I
Right.
said the thing, and he said the thing back. And I said, what did you say? And he told me, and I'm like, oh my God. It was verbatim. So, and I never told him, about that because he's not witchy at all. So he calls what I do my church stuff. He's like loves to stay out of it, and that's a good thing. I'm fine with that. I don't need my partner involved. But it was pretty amazing.
That's pretty awesome. That's
Yeah,
really awesome.
yeah.
Especially, I love it when you like totally forget about it and then it happens.
That's usually when it's most powerful, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. Okay, and so my last question, um, if you could recommend and had to pick just three books to tell somebody these are the ones that I would recommend for the craft,
To
what
just
would they be?
to learn, like if you wanted to learn magic.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
good question. Probably Mastering Witchcraft by Paul Husson. And a lot of people go, oh, he's a Satanist. No, he's not. He's a traditional witch. There's a lot of hexing, there's a lot of cursing, I know. But the reason he teaches that is to teach technique, not necessarily to teach you how to curse people. In fact, if you read the book, he says you probably don't want to do this unless you want to have the repercussions of it. But this is how it works. And so I recommend Paul Husson's Mastering Witchcraft. I think that I think it came out in 1970, and it's still one of the best manuals for witchcraft around.
Okay.
I think for what else to study magic, actually to study magic. A lot of what I teach isn't in books, so that's the problem. And so, but I do, Dion Fortune's fiction is amazing. She put all of the really good stuff in the fiction. Her nonfiction is good, but there's always this sort of like layer of secrecy because of the oaths and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but with her fiction, she didn't bother with the secrecy. She just blurted it right out. So you'll find so much good stuff in her fiction. I would recommend her fiction quite a lot. What else for magic? Well, mm, I um I, I like Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley. It's a little bit of a tough read for a lot of people, but it's worth the effort. And just not necessarily because you want to do everything he says, but that you can kind of understand a lot of the magical theory. And it's worth just kind of trudging through that book just to understand things a little better. People have a real big misconception about him. He was a prude when it came to black magic. He hated it. He hated black magic, and everybody thinks that he was like this Satanist and black magician, but he wouldn't associate with people that did what he thought would be black magic. So he really was very spiritually oriented. He just was his own brand of spiritual. And I'm not a Thelemite, necessarily. I'm not a Crowley person, but that's a great book, a great book to read for anybody. Another one of his that's really good and a lot easier to read is called Magic Without Tears. And the problem with that book, the cool thing about Magic in Theory and Practice is it was pre-Thelema, so it was before all of his sort of religion that he started. Magic Without Tears has a lot of Thelema in it, which is still interesting. But if that's not what you're interested in, it might be, a lot of page turning. But the cool thing about Magic Without Tears is it's a series of letters of questions that somebody's asking him and he's answering it. And he has to do it in such a way that he speaks very simply and clearly because this person isn't necessarily understanding him at his most esoteric. So it's Crowley in a very lucid state. You really get everything from him kind of explained very simply without a lot of the flowery stuff that he tended to use. So it's another Crowley book I like. It's funny that I'm giving you two Crowley books. It's not like my very favorite author, but I do like Crowley.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, and Magical Herbalism and the Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs by Scott Cunningham. Love both of those books a lot. He's amazing. He's a wonderful author.
Awesome.
I know I
Yes.
gave you 6 books. You
No,
wanted
that's great.
to.
I
Well,
could keep going if you could, because I think the books are great, and I think they're a really good. Actually, I think they're a wonderful, great resource that kind of isn't thought out much anymore.
I think
Um,
a lot of people would do well to read fairy tales, to read fiction, and things that are very with a lot of imagery, because what that does, people do things like visualization exercises, and I just fall asleep out of boredom doing visualization exercises. But if I read a fairy tale or I listen to a fairy tale, I've got all my imagination is being exercised. And the more you do that, the better. Not only for your visualization skills, but with fairy tales, I have a saying, a fairy tale a day keeps the magic in play. And what that means is there's so much wisdom in those, especially the really old ones, like Grimm and before, Grimm fairy tales, and even the older ones, where you really learn about how fairies work, how magic works. There's so much symbolism in there, and also just like with life, there's more in fairy tales than in almost any holy book, as far as to teach you how to live your life and how to get through problems and all of those things. And I think that it's a shame that what we've done to fairy tales, we've turned them into a joke, and
yes.
they are a piece of sacred literature that's part of the I don't know, just part of the collective unconscious mind of humanity. And all cultures have them. It's not just the ones from Europe. All cultures have fairy tales. And I think if we were really smart and if we really wanted to understand magic, we would spend more time researching those things. Those are very, very important things to have in our minds.
Well, yeah, and especially when you think about like that was a way of passing down all that knowledge and information in a way that could be easily remembered and recited over
Yes.
and over and over again.
It goes straight back to the Bardic tradition.
Yeah.
And a lot of those tales are fragments of old. Some of them are fragments of old mythology, of old actual mythology, and but those that aren't necessarily part of mythology, they are still stories about magic. They're stories about another world, and I don't know. People would much rather read about correspondences or something like that. Those are smart. I agree with them. I mean, you have to have that.
Right.
But if you put more of your time into just like expanding your mind and massaging your imagination and allowing yourself to understand magic from that point of view, I think you would probably be a lot more powerful than learning another candle spell.
I would agree with you, and that's very much how I work magic. And I know everybody kind of has their own way and form of doing things, but I don't think that there is any magic or spell work that I do that doesn't incorporate some kind of visualization in it, because it's just such a powerful thing for me that gets results. So why would I
Yes.
not use it in
Y-
everything?
Yes, I agree. I agree. And everybody visualizes in a different way. Some people say, I can't visualize. I'm like, well, that's why you should be listening to fairy tales, because whatever that is, that experience that you're having while you're in the fairy tale, that's how you visualize.
Yes, yes, exactly. And especially audiobooks. I think the audiobooks are great to listen to, where you can, close your eyes and fully immerse yourself into that world and
Nothing
put those
better.
figures in there, in your mind, and all the colors and the layers and um
Yeah, there's nothing better. I'm putting more and more fairy tales up. They're not the most popular part of my channel, but I just think it's a service, to have more fairy tales that you can just listen to.
yes, I've
And the
enjoyed.
really and the really old ones.
Yes, I've enjoyed those, and I like that you even you add in like that theatrical touch to it by doing some of the
Some of the
voices and
voices.
stuff.
And
Yes,
I've started doing a little analysis after them too, which I think is good.
Yes, yes. But I have really enjoyed those so far.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have, and I did enjoy the fairy magic course, of
Oh,
course.
good. I'm so glad you loved it. Oh, good.
Yes, yes,
That's
I
nice.
did, I absolutely did, and I can't wait till my kid gets to the point where she starts asking questions and we get to play more
Yes.
and all of that stuff.
Yes. I was
So,
always hoping, because I never had kids. I mean, my kid is Ariel's Corner, um, but I do have lots of nieces and nephews, and I was always wondering, I wonder if any of them are ever gonna, like, come to me or figure it out, or I'm gonna see something
yeah.
in them, and so far, no.
Oh,
No, not really. Not not
aw.
really. They're wonderful, but they just don't seem inclined that way, so I don't push that.
Yeah, I hope my kid just is all about it. I mean, we have so much fun just playing anyway. Like, well, her favorite thing is to dress up as a witch and
Oh,
make mommy dress
good.
up
That's a
as a
good
witch.
sign.
And we get our brooms out and we ride around the house on our brooms, and yeah, we're
I
crazy. We
I
have
I
fun.
wanted to be a witch when I think I was 5, and so my grandmother got a witch costume, and she'd got the putty nose and the
Aw.
warts and everything, and I looked in the mirror and I started crying, and she said,
Aw.
"What?" And I said, "I didn't wanna look like that." So, they had to take all the putty off. All I wanted was the cape and the hat and the broom. I wanted to be me, and so
Right.
then once they took all the putty and stuff off, I was happy.
Yeah, she likes to dress up in the really pretty, almost frilly witchy outfits.
Nice. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
Yeah, she's gotta have a tutu with everything she does, so
I love that.
yeah,
Good for
she's got
her.
her tutu and her witch hat, and she's got a little cauldron and her broom.
Oh, that's
It's
adorable. I
also
love that.
I know, it's precious. I gotta get some more pictures of her playing like that to have, but yeah, so I can remind her when she gets older.
They
You've
grow
always
up
been a
so
witch.
fast.
I know.
Yeah. So having those pictures is really a good idea.
Yes, yes, I would agree. Well, I we're about out of time, which makes me sad because I could talk to you
Oh,
forever.
well, hopefully I
Um,
said something that's worthwhile and it's not just like, "Oh god, who's this?"
well, I think you're fabulous, and
Thank you.
I could sit and talk to you and listen to you all day because I love listening to your voice and your meditations too.
Oh, I have a brand new meditation I just recorded for the Fool card in the tarot.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay,
look for that. It's gonna be released sometime this weekend on
awesome. All
YouTube.
right. Well, thank you. Okay, so tell the audience where they can find out more about you, Ariel.
Okay, my website is arielscorner.com. That's ariels-corner.com. Ariel's Corner with a hyphen .com. And it's got pretty much everything. It's got all my courses, it's got all my I have little booklets, little free booklets that are sort of like mini courses. It's got all my meditations, it's got all of my lectures. So, and I've got so much stuff on there, and it's all free. I don't charge a dime for anything, and never have, never will. And so there's that. And then if you are interested in hanging out with us on our Facebook group or our Discord server, you can see there's little links for that in the footer of each page of the website. Plus you can sign up for emails and all that stuff. So it's a fun, easy community. The cool thing about doing stuff at Ariel's Corner is you're not locked in. You can do whatever you want. You don't there's nothing to join. There's nothing to pay
Right,
for. So it's just take what
and
you
there's
want
no
and
like
go on your way.
exactly, and there's no prerequisites
No,
either.
there's none. The only thing is the witchcraft trilogy, what I call non-denominational witchcraft. I do recommend that you do those 3 courses in order. So you do the Witch's Primer first, uh, Beyond the Basics is like the intermediate course second, and then there's an advanced course called Advancing Your Craft, and that's the last one. So, I that's the only thing that I say try to do those in order, but otherwise, all those other courses, just take what you want.
Yeah, and you do list all those recommendations in each one when you get to it.
Yes.
So if somebody stumbles upon one and they're like, "Oh, well, is this the right one?" You tell them, we recommend you take this one first. So
Yes.
yeah, all that's out there. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I think your work is wonderful. I hope that everybody will go check it out. Definitely check out the website, and it will give you all the links to all the social media places. And
Oh,
of course, don't forget to check out thewitchsource.com, where you can find out more about the podcast and my Facebook page and YouTube channel and all the good stuff going on there. Would love for you to come over and do a little bit of shopping if you're looking for magical supplies. It does help out. So until next time, everybody, thank you for being here. And Ariel, thank you for joining me.
thank you so much for having me. And thank you for doing all this wonderful work. This is a great, great thing that you're doing.
You as well. Thank you so much. All
Blessed
right.
be.
Till next time, stay magical.